My name is Rich Schmidt. I'm here with Paul Durant. We're at Durant Vineyards. It's June 4th, 2019. Thanks so much for joining us, Paul. We'll start you off by asking you, why wine?
It's really why farming. So I think that is what I always wanted to do growing up, and so I would have farmed probably if I wasn't into wine. Mm-hmm. So my folks came out here and really bought this property here on the hill and farmed, hazelnuts, which used to be called filberts, and cherries and English walnuts, and got into wine kind of through that. Started planting vineyards over the years, but my passion has always been the farming side.
And where did that passion? Do you have an idea where that came from? Why farming?
I don't know. I think I find there's just something really peaceful about it, and I think everybody finds their passion, and how they find their passion. You just can't always put your finger on it. I just was really lucky to be out here and have the opportunity to experience a bunch of different things. I like the seasons, I like the land. I just feel a great connection to that. So it's been, I'm the luckiest guy on the planet. Yeah.
So before you got into the industry, you kind of grew up in it. So tell me about kind of your impressions growing up around farming around wine.
So I think it was always, I don't think you really appreciate what you have when you're around it all the time, because you don't know anything different. My parents, I just remember as a kid, spending a lot of time with the Blosser family, hanging out with them. There was a farmer on this hill. His name was Ted Werfs, him and his wife Vernie Werfs. We would often end up there for dinner, just kind of by happenstance. And I always just loved being around Ted and kind of hearing about how he farmed on this hill. And we ended up buying a lot of property from them, and as did the Blosser family. So, I just think you kind of just come to, it just becomes a little bit second nature. Mm-hmm. So, and I always wanted to do it growing up. I knew early on what I wanted to do, something in ag, something along those lines. But my parents said no. So, I was gone for 15 years doing my own thing as a mechanical engineer, and I traveled all over the U.S., had a bunch of different experiences with that, but I always knew I'd come back at some point. So, and I'm fortunate enough to do it while my parents are still healthy. And, I've been back here for 9 years and really been able to kind of, my timing was probably spot on, because when I stepped in 9 years ago, it was just at when things were starting to really ramp in the industry. Mm-hmm. So I've really enjoyed the growth. Mm-hmm. So that's been great.
So your parents said no. Tell me about that.
Well, I think that a couple things, my mom had some experience, like her family ranching business, and I think it's always a little bit difficult to be under the thumb of your parents and not be your own man or your own woman. Mm-hmm. And I think that they wanted me to know that I could walk away and have a life and a career elsewhere. And then also at the time, I don't think it was big enough to really support a family. It would have been rough. Mm-hmm. But it is nice knowing in the back of my mind, because I do work with my folks a lot, that I could always tell them to pound sand and I could leave and have a good career somewhere else.
So once you decided to come back, tell me about what the kind of transition was like, and then what your kind of learning curve was like.
So the learning curve was pretty easy, because even while I was, I lived in Oregon, and I never really left, so I was still super involved out here. Mm-hmm. Through all the harvests. I'd take time off from my other career to be here, to be present, was really engaged in things that were going on. We also make olive oil here too, so I've made every year we run that mill, I've made every vintage of olive oil, since we started it. So I still kind of had my fingers in it. I think the thing that needed to happen was, my parents had maybe it'd been a little bit of an avocation for them. Mm-hmm. It became my vocation. Mm-hmm. And so it needed to really grow. And so the learning curve has been how to grow a business in a sustainable way where you can make money and then also have the right people and the right mix of employees, that sort of thing. I think that's the biggest thing about in any organization is, having the right team in place, because you can't do it all. And I think that's where a lot of wineries struggle, is that they're not willing, the owners aren't willing to let go of certain aspects of their business and let really good people run with it. And we've done an admirable job of that.
So you talk about learning to grow in a sustainable way and learning to find a team like that. So when you came on board 9 years ago, was that something you already had envisioned, or was that something you kind of learned once you got here?
It's something I already had. I kind of knew how to do it. So I had really great training. As a mechanical engineer, I ran some projects, and then my last stint was in working for a large general contractor, and I was remote from the home office. So I kind of had my group of guys, and it was about 30 really strong personalities shoved together to build buildings. And so I kind of learned how to lead that team and really lead diverse personalities. So I think the one big switch for me, because coming out of construction, is male dominated, and that's just the fact. And you come into the wine industry, especially on the hospitality side, it's totally different. It's like every one of my managers here when I came in, it was they'd come through the nursery industry or out of grocery or just a whole different career path. So I think that was probably one of the interesting switches, but it worked out really well.
So what are you looking for someone when you're asking them to join a team here, or asking them to lead part of your team, or what is it you're looking for?
Oh, boy, that's a good question. I think I'm kind of looking for somebody that's a self-starter, and I kind of like eclectic personalities. I really believe, maybe I'm going down a rabbit hole here a little bit, but, I want a really diverse customer base, and I look out across that lawn at times, and I got families out there. I have, retired people out there. I have, it's multi-ethnic customer base. It's all sorts of orientations, and I think that if I want that in my customers, I have to have that in my work, in my people that work for me. So that's just really important to me.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yep.
You're also active in a lot of industry organizations. So tell me about kind of what part of the industries you're active in and why.
So I'm on the Willamette Valley Wine Association board, and I think I was asked to come onto that board because we're small. We're a small player, and I think we're mainly growers. So I think I represented board diversity in terms of kind of how our business is set up, because you have some big players on that board. But I think the board has always been pretty smart about, even though maybe I don't pay as many winery dues as the bigger players, or grape taxes, they want a broad range of industry players there. So I'm on that board. I've been on other boards like Randall's Children's Hospital. I think that's really important to get back into your community just through different things. And we do a variety of fundraising type stuff too. So
you talked about olive oil earlier. Obviously, one of the things that makes you guys unique here.
Yeah.
So tell me why olive oil and how that part of the business has grown.
Well, I really think the olive oil, I give my parents a lot of credit for that. And my dad he's always been, what's your differentiator? What makes you unique? And I think when they built Red Ridge and put in the nursery, it struggled for a while because people don't come to wine country to buy lavender. They come to drink wine and experience food. So I think that they saw an opening with the olive oil as a real differentiator in terms of destination, tourism, so to speak. So I think that's kind of what started it, and I think my dad was just fascinated with it, and I'm a mechanical engineer, and it's all mechanical extraction methods, and it just fit really well, and it's really grown. It's turned out to be a pretty involved business, but it's definitely the go-to place for that. And I've learned a lot about how to make really good olive oil, and it complements the wine.
So, two questions I want to ask as a follow-up to that, because you are two good points there. I'm curious how you went about learning to make olive oil and how it had that kind of your process has evolved.
So I really learned. So I took a little bit of short course at UC Davis. They have, it's the Mondavi Center at UC Davis. They have the Olive Center, which is part of the Mondavi. And then when we bought that mill, it came with 2 years of a miller from Rome. So he flew out for a couple weeks in 2008 and 2009 and just lived with us. And he showed us he taught us really how, not so much how to run the mill, but what really good olive oil tastes like. He also kind of showed us how, kind of how to make the tweaks in the mill to make really good olive oil. And he was just a wealth of information. And then over time, things break and you make mistakes and you just get better and better at it. So, and yeah, we make good olive oil. I mean, we've really honed our craft. And it's a little bit olive oil. There's no olive oil making. There's olive oil millers versus wine making, because in winemaking you have all these tools. You can add this, you can add that, you can age it, you can do different things with barrels. With olives, it's all you have is the oil, and all you're doing is trying to extract the oil and not screw it up. So, and trying to have it in balance, but there just aren't that many. You don't have that many levers to pull. So, yeah.
You talked about them complementing each other, wine and olive oil. Tell me about that, how that fits for your kind of overall philosophy.
Well, I think that there's two aspects to that. The first is a little bit cultural. They're both really ancient, ancient crops. I mean, geez, you go back to Jesus Christ, it's like there's the wine and there's also the olive oil. I mean, back of that whole time, I mean, they're both just have so much history. And I think olive oil even more so than wine. So I think that they're great cultural complements to each other. I find that really, really fascinating. And then also, one thing, this whole advent of buy local and where's your food come from? And we're really an open book about how we make the oil, where we get the fruit. Same thing with how we do all our wines. And I think especially in Oregon, with Oregon being kind of the epicenter of that, we've got a tremendous amount of support and interest from just people in the community, especially out of this kind of the Northwest. I don't know if you could have pulled this off in another location as well as we have, just because we've had great support from just locals.
So the actual wine making is fairly recent to Durant. For a long time it was just grape growing.
Just grape growing, yeah. And so 2003, I think we, Dean Fisher with Adia made 60 cases of wine under our own label. And so that was kind of the start. And then we've just, since we were so focused on growing, we just kind of organically started having winemakers that we were selling grapes to start making a little bit of wine for us under our label. And we've grown that up until last year to we were having about 5,000 to 6,000 cases made by these kind of this army of winemakers that we sell fruit to. But then, yeah, that changed just in 2018. So built the winery. So that's a big step for us. So it's all in-house now.
It's all in-house. So how have you kind of prepared for that, and what is the sort of the plan for that now going forward?
Well, that's a good question. So hopefully, we have a little bit more control. So, but we will, we have such diverse topography here. We'll still maintain kind of these very small bottlings off designated areas of the vineyard. But we're always going to be small. I mean, I don't have any ambitions to be, if we still kept all our fruit, we could be a 25,000 case winery. And I want us to be right at about 5,000 cases, maybe 6. And then really sell it. I mean, I love the idea of putting wine in people's hands and then seeing them walk away with it versus trying to work through, the classic distribution model. So it's a lot of work, and I kind of talked about this, that team part. You need a really good team to make that happen. I can't sell the wine. So, but that's kind of how we want to take it. That's the grand plan.
You mentioned your block style where you don't blend wines. Tell me about the reasoning behind that.
Well, I think it was something we kind of fell into, not by accident, but maybe by happenstance, because we were selling designated vineyard blocks to winemakers, and they didn't have any choice. They didn't have anything to blend it with. So we would get what we sent them, we'd get it back in the bottle. And over time, we realized that was just super distinctive wines. And then as we added more and more blocks, and started talking about those, we had people that became really interested in like, man, I really love that wine off the Bishop block. And we've just built a fan base around these vineyard block designators. And I think it gives people a real connection to an area of your vineyard and maybe a winemaking style, but then it also highlights what the vintages look like, because you're not trying to mask it and have vintage to vintage consistency. And I think that's the real charm of when you're selling directly, as we do, or we're telling a story as much as we're selling the wine.
You mentioned your different topography here. So take me through a little bit about the different parts of your vineyard and what makes them unique.
So we have kind of four now, distinct vineyard areas. I'll start kind of at the bottom. So we have a vineyard area called Southview, which in that comprises 5 distinct vineyard block areas. And I'm sure, as everybody knows, it's sedimentary soil, so you're in the Missoula flood area. And so that's really a vigorous site, and it's really hot. So it's a lot of full sun, so it tends to ripen a little bit earlier. And so it's kind of an interesting block to play with. Really great for whites. And then we have some nice pockets of some red wines or Pinot Noirs to come off of there too. And we have what we call the Home Vineyard, and that comprises about 12 vineyard areas. And that's my parents' original land purchase was down there. And it's just deep, rich, jewelry soils with some areas that are a little bit on the shallower side. And then we have a block further up the hill, which is a really cool site. So it ripens really late, and it's called Stony Crest, and it was all forested, and so we cleared it. So again, these are really deep, just dark, almost like chocolate soils. They're so dark red, and produces just some of our best wines. And then our last purchase was here on the hill, was a block we call Mason, which was owned by one of the longest landowners here on the hill, a guy named Lee Mason. And so we've cleared that and started planting that to the vineyard too, and we'll see what happens there.
A lot of diversity to work with.
Yeah, which is great. Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
So you obviously, in addition to olive oil, you have lodging here on site, you have a nursery, you have hiking. It's kind of a unique business model. So tell me about how all these parts came together.
Well, I think you'd like to say it was all a master plan, and we're just in like year 46 of it. But I think it's a little bit of, again, like I'm the big beneficiary of some of the investments my parents made, and I'm grateful for that every day. But I think a lot of it has been, where our anchor points is the farm. So what I want people to do is have a connection to the farm as much as possible. And so the nursery kind of lends itself to that. I've become really, I think that people in this, because we get a lot of people that travel, and people want to have a sense of what's the connection to the land, because maybe they don't have it in suburbia or where they live in a more urban setting. And so that's a little bit like these very informal vineyard tours where people can go out and walk and see the vineyard firsthand and see what's going on, and a little bit of these walking paths with some signage that really kind of gives them a sense to identify with it, and then hopefully come back. And my mom talks about when she envisioned this place, she wanted a place where you could drive in and get out of your car and maybe walk through the lavender a little bit, stand under the wisteria, maybe read your book for a minute, and then get back to your car, and we wouldn't even necessarily see you. So we're not forcing somebody through a check-in and a check-out or a rope line where we're trying to make the sale. And I think that walking path's a little bit that way too, where you can have a sense of that this is an authentic place, and maybe find a little bit of peace along the way.
Do you find a certain part of your overall business model that appeals to people more, or are people coming more for wine? Are they coming for olives?
It's a little bit of both. I mean, obviously people come here for wine, and and then we try to peel them off and sell them a little bit of olive oil. But we also have people that are just fascinated with the oil just in and of itself. So it's really hard to suss out if there's a prime driver. I've had people from Pakistan, Afghanistan, Lebanon, here that they're not here for the wine because their religion doesn't allow them to drink the wine, but they're here for the olives, and to see an olive tree and to have a really great olive oil kind of takes them back to their cultural, heritage too. So, and those are some really cool moments for me. It's fascinating.
So how do you define your role here at Durant? How do you see yourself as the kind of your role here?
I have a lot of hats here. So I still like to do the farming. So if I still spend time on the tractor, and I run the vineyards in conjunction with my dad, I'm kind of the glue. So I kind of knit together, I keep my management team focused. I can drill down into detail if I need to. And then I can also let them run with things. I also recognize that there's value in being the face of the brand at times. So I do some marketing stuff, and people like to meet the guy who made the olive oil, or shake the hand of the kid who grew up in it and now gets to run it. So I spend some of that, but I try to keep everybody kind of between the rails as much as possible.
And what's your favorite part? What's your favorite part of being here?
It's a broken record, but I love the farming. I love farming, and honestly, in the fall, I love the fall. So, because we have harvest, I literally get to run. We're in harvest mode for 3 months. So 25% of my year is spent in a harvest methodologies, because we do the grapes, and then we're making the wine, and then shortly after we get the grapes off, we have olives coming up here, and we will run that mill. I've run that mill as late as the 24th of December, and it's exhausting, but it's just, I've worked 24-hour shifts up there. We can just I love it. My staff thinks I'm nuts because I'm just whooping their ass, but I have a great time with it. And so, yeah, that's my favorite part, and it's also hard too, because then I check out. I'm really like that, kind of keeping the people between the rails. That I kind of take my hands off the steering wheel and hopefully not fly the 747 into the side of the mountain. So, yeah.
Compare the harvest for me. I'm curious, the grape harvest versus the olive harvest. How are they similar? How are they different?
Well, in the case of, the grape harvest is kind of fast. It's a fast day. You get up in the morning, you get your grapes picked, you're either delivering the fruit to the winery, or if they're buying the fruit, or we're hauling it down to our winery, and that processing starts. The olives are, I buy a lot of olives, so I'll work with these growers, and they'll get their truck loaded, maybe at like 2 in the morning, and then that truck drives all night to get here, and then so I'm offloading that truck, and I have refrigeration here, so I'm getting the olives tucked away so that they don't spoil, and then I start cranking that mill. With the picking of our own olives, it is so tedious. It's a slow process to pick olives. It's not like the grapes, so that's just a whole different kind of cadence to it. It's like the frenetic part about the olives is running the mill, versus like the frenetic parts of the grapes, at least for me, is getting the fruit off the vine. So they're just different. Yeah.
With the success your olives have had, are you surprised someone else in the area hasn't tried to do it as well?
Well, I think there's more and more. I think it's really neat. It's a really exciting time for us. We just had our first olive oil field day, and we had close to 100 people show up, and Oregon State has a research grant now to start doing propagation trials and some cold hardiness evaluation. And so I think with Oregon State putting some actual science behind it, because for the handful of people that are doing it like me, it's just all anecdotal, like, let's try this, that kind of worked. Well, let's try it again, maybe we didn't do it right. So I think so that's really exciting, and hopefully more people will grow it. I'd love to have more people close by so I can buy the fruit closer. So it's kind of not many people think about growing olives in Oregon, that's for sure.
You talked earlier about you growing up in the industry and kind of growing up with some contemporaries like Alex Sokol-Blas, or people who are on the industry now. So what does it mean to you and to them to be like second generation Oregon wine? And what is it you're hoping to kind of take from the first and move forward?
I think it's interesting, and I'm sure it's a common theme through every one of these interviews, is that collaboration thing. And people talk about that a lot. But it's the real deal. And I think it deserves to be talked about because it is what happened, and it's still kind of what happens. I think like in instances like with Alex Blosser and Jesse Lang, those, we kind of have it's almost like an unspoken understanding. It's like, man, it's hard to work in a family business, and then you're also trying to grow grapes, that's hard. I mean, there's a lot of factors that say second generation shouldn't happen. But I think given the right circumstances and the right belief in it, it works. So I think those are some real commonalities. And then kind of that other piece, the other big takeaways is like people that I get to work with that don't have a vineyard because they came to the game late. There's no way you could buy ground up here now if you're just starting out. So I really value working with some of these guys that don't have estate fruit, and they're so grateful to get the grapes, and they just want to make great wine. And they know they're not going to get rich, but they're going to have a great life, and they're going to work really hard. So I like that other aspect of it too. That's a great point of collaboration where you are really part of. They're not vertically integrated, and so you get to be kind of the wind beneath their wings, so to speak. And that's a really neat piece for me. And my dad gives me a hard time. We could sell most of our fruit to just a handful of guys, a handful of grower or wineries, but I like to sell a ton here, a ton there. So we sell to, I think we have like 14 directions we go with the fruit. And some people are taking a couple tons, and some people are taking, 80 tons. But I like working with those little guys too, and they're just as passionate about their 2 tons as the guy who's getting 80. Sometimes.
Sure.
More so. Yeah.
You talk about that collaboration, and you're not wrong, that's a pretty common theme across our interviews. I'm curious, with the rapid growth and with the people who are not less vertically integrated, is that changing?
I think it's a risk. Yeah. I definitely think it has to be tended to,
How do you tend to it?
Well, I think it's a little bit of like doing, sometimes being on these boards, being involved. I think listening to what's happening. I think some of these bigger players that have come in, they should be commended for how well they've integrated. They've been really respectful. But I think I think with anything, like when the industry gets as big as it is, it starts to you can see where there's kind of the stress points, and that's just inevitable in anything, and any sort of maturing industry.
So what do you see then as you look forward in the industry? What are you looking forward to? What are you hoping for? And then what are your concerns as you look forward as the industry grows?
Well, I'm looking forward to, like, personally, I just want to keep making really great Pinot Noir. And I think that is really fun for me, and I think we're making some of the best wines we've made. I mean, so that's great. I really look forward to continuing to innovate in the vineyard and do those sorts of things. Then the things that I worry about is, just on the farming side of it, it's like, man, I got to sell my grapes. And that's a big book of my business, is selling grapes. And there's more grapes being planted all the time. So it's like, I want to see the industry grow because it needs to take the grapes. But it, like anything, it'll go through a cycle. And we've been on a nice cycle with pretty good demand, but it's going to go down sometimes. I just want to be ready.
Nice to have the olive oil as a backup.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're going to take you back a little bit. Curious, we talked a couple times about growing up in the industry. Do you have any favorite childhood memories growing up in the industry, or moments that stand out to you?
Oh, I think it's probably, I have great memories of harvest, picking, and I remember picking in the rain. It seemed like it was cold. I mean, it hasn't been cold up here for many harvests, you know, but I remember being cold and wet. And I have this great affinity for Chardonnay. So Chardonnay for me is like your grandmother's chocolate chip cookies, because I like taste Chardonnay grapes and it instantly takes me back to my childhood. And that's just something I love picking Chardonnay because they filled my bucket really fast because they're big. And but I just remember, and it's such a distinctive flavor for me. I don't think there's not a time when I don't, like in the fall where I'm out sampling fruit, that I'm not thinking about growing up. So those, for whatever reason, Chardonnay is one of my best memories. And then my dad and I, growing up, he and I drove every one of these posts in the vineyard. And I don't know how I didn't kill him or he didn't kill me, because I ran the tractor and he ran the post pounder, and I don't know how we did that. It was crazy. My parents worked really hard, and as a consequence, so did my sister and I.
You mentioned new winery. What do you? We talked a little bit about the kind of the future there, but what are you hoping down the road that will bring to Durant? What are you hoping as you look down the road for your brand 5-10 years down the future?
Well, I think winemaking is all about storytelling. So I think it's the kind of the last piece of really being able to tell the story, and about, you know, because I can talk all day long about harvests and what the weather was like in 2003 versus 2013, or back when I was a kid. So I've got that, but there's always been something where we then hand these grapes off to a winemaker that's remote, that we kind of lose the story a little bit. And so I'm really excited that we can, you know, I was able to taste these wines and work with our winemaker all the way through. And, you know, the other day we sat in this room right here and tasted through barrels, and we everybody did their best blend, and then we shared our notes. That for me is new, and is really exciting to get to do that. And so that'll just broaden our ability to connect with customers over that too. So, yeah.
When we interviewed your parents, your dad mentioned his refocusing rather than retirement.
Yes.
He also mentioned some upcoming projects. So if you're at liberty to divulge, I'm curious what you have on the. He said at least 5 years worth of projects. So I'm curious what you're working on.
Oh, geez. I don't know what's on his list. So this year we kind of took a year off from projects, but my dad is a great projects guy, and he loves to build, and he's a testament to, you know, bodies in motion tend to stay in motion. So, and his motion is building. So we have we need to expand our olive facility. So we need a bottling room and a warehouse for that, more production space. We bottle about 25,000 liters of olive oil. It's a lot, you know. We're bottling tens of thousands of bottles every quarter. So that's going to get expanded. We're going to continue to plant more vineyard. I'm continuing to work on more olives. So there's just a litany of projects.
All right. You guys have any questions? That's all the questions that I have for you. Is there anything I should have asked or that we didn't talk about that we should have?
I don't think so. No, I think it's great.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for setting up with your parents as well.
I know. Geez, it's been, I think so. Was it Stephanie Hoffman?
Yeah.
Yeah, she has been on my case about it. You guys get on that.
And we did, and we thank you for that. So thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thank you.
It's
always good, I think.